So we have with us today Skye Hicks with Elite Psychiatry. And I guess just start off, Skye, and kind of tell us about, I guess I always say go through what was your journey through what got you where you are right now. Of course, we wanted to learn about your business. Our goal with this podcast, excuse me, our goal with this podcast is to get more information out to our community. We're all in the
Sure.
healthcare related fields. Obviously, mental health, I guess, is how you classify you guys self.
Mhm.
So give us a rundown on everything.
Yeah, the owners are David and KD, and I think they've been around for about a year, year and a half or so. Um, got bigger, was hoping to expand. At the time, I had just graduated from TTU, Tennessee Tech University, um, with psychiatric mental health, and I had done bedside since my wife's also a nurse, and we went travel nursing starting in like 2018 to 2020.
Nice.
COVID hit. We were in San Francisco. That's what
Oh, where you were?
we were. So
Oh,
we
wow.
were locked down pretty early. So
There's
that was a really long period where that was a rough year to be locked away when we were hoping we were going to get to travel more and kind of do that sort
well,
of
and
thing.
and now that you brought that up, we hear so much about that. One of the worst side effects of coming out of COVID was that, I always say as humans, we are social creatures.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden now we're forced to be isolated. And you hear so many side effects of that. I guess more so I hear it from, and you can clear up on that, but mainly from the children's side. It had a bigger impact on the younger kids.
I think it had a huge impact on socialization. I mean, I've seen a number of different kids that they just never even transitioned back. They just
Right.
continue doing remote learning because either it was easier for them to do at their home, or whether it was just because maybe socialization was hard for them, and then that was better for them, and then they found out, oh, I can perform better here. So I've seen it both ways, but in general, no, I would agree. I've explained to a few people when they've come in and asked me, um, what are your opinions, and what do you think about why it seems like mental health is at least more prominent, or why do you see so much more ADHD? Is that a thing? And my opinion on it is mostly that, if you look at a lot of the diagnoses, like one of the biggest things that you're looking for sometimes is, where are you getting these like large disruptions in your daily life? Like, where do you notice that you are triggered by certain things, or you get anxiety about certain things? Like, what's the source of those things? Like, where does it
Sure.
kind of come from? And, you know, a lot of times, I don't know. It's just more like, if you can really identify a lot of them, most of the time it has to do with like what I guess I'd consider like like transitions, like when you like kind of deal with, like, let's say, a 9 or 10-year-old and he has ADHD and there's some hyperactivity. Well, a lot of the things that they don't talk about is there's a lot of that is wrapped up with like emotional regulation, like
Sure.
because it's neurodevelopmental, and there's just so much more to it than like what people think is superficially, like, oh, it's hyperactivity, it's
Yeah.
like this sort of thing, you know what I mean? And
Well,
so
there's so many different aspects I think to that, and especially when you're dealing with younger people. I think to me, I would think the younger would be a much more difficult task because they don't have
mm,
a lot of life processes in play
sure.
yet. They haven't had a lot of life experiences. I think it's human nature to be afraid of. Public speaking is more
Yeah,
fearsome than death if you do the
for a lot of people, yeah.
if you do the research on it. So I can see that there's many facets, and so many different things will affect us in different ways.
Hmm.
It's just like, um, I don't. Are you guys with military as well? Do you guys deal with some military?
Yeah, we deal with some military.
Yeah.
I don't think it's I mean, yeah,
Well,
we basically deal with military.
but
Well,
it's
we
just
basically do. So I see kids actually there. I'm the person who sees the pediatric and adolescent patients.
so that's more of your
So
specialty then.
that's more of my
Okay.
is more of my specialty.
Okay.
But I see plenty of adults as well. So I would say we see starting at 6 years old all the way up through into. as old as you would like to be.
Well,
Um,
some adults are still kids, right?
exactly. Well, I would probably consider myself in that too. So, um,
Exactly.
but yeah, and going back to like full circle to the point, I think the comparison there is as a collective, like a society. I think COVID was that monster transition. Like,
Yeah,
your parents got divorced or like you had some significant trauma when you were a kid. That was like a collective trauma that, so much stuff is exacerbated by being isolated.
so it amplifies
So it
everything.
just
Amplifies it.
it seems to me that it just amplified everything and it just kind of brought out the worst parts of us where you've been going along for so long and it's so gradual that you just slowly build in ways to cope
Sure.
and you get a little bit older, but then that just kind of was this collective break for everyone where you don't get a say in this. You're going to get locked in a room for a year,
Yeah, no
and
options.
you have no options. You just
Yeah.
have to do this. And I think it just kind of was kind of the tipping point for a lot of people
Yeah, I would
in
have to
general, to finally at least get to the point where they're like, I need to take care of myself.
I
Like
would
I am
have to
not
agree
feeling
with you
good.
100%. Yeah. So let's circle back a little bit. Like I said, obviously to me, you don't see a ton of, I don't, at least I don't see a lot of mental health practitioners like yourself.
Mhm.
It seems to be more of a specialty subset. So circle back, like what piqued your interest? How far back does it go for you that got you like, this is what I want to do?
Yeah, so I think in general when I went to school, it was not my number one pick. It was probably my second pick. Just in general interest. I enjoyed mental health just because I think everybody has a unique family history
Let's
and
not go into
story.
family history.
Yeah, like so, I like anyone else. I had plenty of that, and at the same time, um, I just I did. I guess I was going to go in a completely different trajectory. I was thinking about I want to do cardiac. I want to work with the heart.
Sure.
My dad, he's had some like heart problems, like AFib, different stuff like that. So I was always interested in that sort of thing. So that's kind of where I was leaning. But I really enjoyed mental health and actually did a lot of rotations, like you were talking about with like veterans. Did a lot at the VA.
Nice.
Um, but then I got out of school. I was going to go do cardiac, but the manager, she quit, or got let go, one or the other. But she was the one that had made like verbal agreement, like, "Hey, you did your practical hours there. You could come work for us." And I wanted to be in CVICU so that I could kind of get all the hours and experience and kind of the high pace sort of thing. Just because I was thinking already transitioning like CRNA work, that sort of thing. So all of a sudden, that doesn't work out, and I'm like, well, I still want to work ICU, so I'll just see what's out there. And I find a job opening for neonatal ICU, and I was only one of two guys I think in the entire like children's hospital portion
Correct.
of
Yeah.
it, and one was on pediatric, and I was in ICU. And so I really, I did that for a year. It was like my introduction into the world of medicine and nursing and everything in general. So that was overwhelming. But at the same time, just being in such kind of like a unique sort of setting and place, there was just like a lot of different nuances going on there. And so this is actually back in East Tennessee in the Tri Cities area. Like I'm originally from Johnson City.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, my wife's
Nice.
family actually was here in Nashville, and
I was
at
going to
some
ask how you kind of came around
yeah,
about being
so
in Dickson or tying up with the docs up in or the
it's
practice.
yeah, it's pretty interesting. So
Yeah.
essentially, um, we like what was that like? What part of the? I'm trying to think where I was at in the story. I kind of
Like,
lost myself.
how did you come about and get yourself involved
Oh,
with? Go ahead and introduce the practice and things
yeah.
like that too.
So
So who you work with and where they are and Dixon,
yes,
et cetera. Go
yeah.
ahead and
So
do that.
we finally got everything squared up. I had gotten out of school, done all those things, and yeah, it was actually a random mutual kind of acquaintance. We just lived by, and he was like, "Hey, I go and see this guy, and they're starting something in Dixon. I think they went back over there. Like, you should talk to him. He's always been really transparent with me. He said maybe they're looking at expanding, and this was just randomly through the grapevine. And so, I got done with my boards, and right after that, I sent out a few emails, and I had remembered that we had talked about that, and so I sent another email, and we ended up setting up an interview and having it and talking with KD and David. And, during the interview, she had asked me, what would you do if you could do anything you wanted it? And I told her, I think I'd probably want to work with kids, like, behavioral disorders, like, neurodevelopmental, that sort of thing. And they had been thinking about wanting to expand into that. And there I was saying that I wanted to do that. So that kind of made a nice little collaboration with me coming on board with them. And since, I think we've been expanding quite rapidly, I think. So,
Well, it's amazing how things kind of come together like that. And that's kind
mhm.
of, I think that's a story of a lot of people's lives, just the right things at the right moment. You encounter the right person, and those types of things just
Yeah.
seem to fall into play. Tell us a little bit about, you said it was David and Katie.
Hmm.
So tell us a little bit about what I guess the whole collective as the group, what you guys do. They obviously, you said you do children, they do, what is the aspects of your
Oh,
practice?
yeah. That's how we generally break it down. So so KD is doing a lot of our administrative back end stuff because, she owns it and she just wants to run it.
Gotcha.
But David is seeing patients, and then there's myself, and his last name's Vincent. So David Vincent, and then KD Wainwright are their names. Um, and so David is seeing patients, I'm seeing patients, and then we have another provider there. She's also a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. Her name's Brittany, and she's there as well.
Very good.
Now, David and Katie are both physician's assistants, so they're PAs.
Okay.
So they were doing other things before they ever decided to do mental health, and then found that they really loved it, and then they went in, and started doing that. So it's a nice to have a little diversity in like kind of the models and backgrounds that you come from,
Sure.
get different perspectives, and it's nice. Um,
So I guess run me through a little bit, like say, how does the process work? If someone wants to reach out to you and work with you guys, what's the process? Is it just you pick somebody you feel comfortable with? Is it an interview process? I really don't know.
No, so
So I'm
there's
just
I
kind of
mean, well,
curious.
there's all kinds of different ways. Like sometimes there's the word of mouth. That's more than you would think. Like hopefully, you can
Correct.
do it. You can do a good job in trying to help people feel better, and then they tell someone else. But now
Of
the
course.
general way, I want to say it's elitepsychtn.com. I think there's setting up some sort of information portal you can do from the website.
Gotcha.
You can literally just go on Google, Elite Psychiatry of Tennessee here in Dickson. Um,
And
hit
we,
the number, and you'll basically call directly into the office. We have Michelle and Claudia, who are our administrators. Claudia's our like basically she's our mom. She does everything,
yeah, I think I
and so
talked with Claudia. She's the one
yeah,
that kind of helped connect
yeah.
us
So
all up.
she's the one that makes sure everything is definitely running the way it needs to be doing. And you'll just call into either one of them will pick up, and you just tell them what's going on and setting up a schedule. And if you have preferences, if you want to rather be with a guy, you want to be with a girl,
Sure.
like like if there's we'll accommodate pretty much anything that you need to do. And usually you'll have to fill out all the initial paperwork that just kind of consents for the treatment and all of those
Right.
things, and kind of the policies for the office. But in general, we do a pretty thorough screening initially, what we call just like an intake summary,
Sure.
just kind of get a little bit of background. But then when we do a new patient appointment, all our new patient appointments are scheduled for an hour.
Okay.
So we actually do like a full hour and can get pretty in depth and review and talk about different trajectories. And, you had said kind of like, what are some other parts of the office? Well, one of the reasons that I really, do drive from Clarksville, like obviously I could have been closer, but the reason that I drive to Dixon is because we're all really close with each other, and we all genuinely care. I think we really want to help people.
Yeah.
And that matters. I think if you, I think if you generally want to help people, then it'll speak for itself. You can't, obviously not everyone, you wish you could help everybody perfectly all the
Sure.
time,
Sure. Sure.
but I would say generally the more caring you have, um, and going the extra step, doing a little bit more than,
You're not just put.
past your time. It's not just another
Yeah.
person or another
Time's up. Time to go.
yeah, like another time to go. Like we have a really integrated kind of system, like a messaging system that's HIPAA compliant, so you can have direct access to asking
Nice.
us questions. It
Yeah.
like pages us, then we can return phone calls. So, we do a lot of stuff just even outside the appointments. We're coordinating with therapists, we're
Right.
talking to schools, we're filling out paperwork, like so people you can get
Lot.
off work if they've had a mental health issue. And
Gotcha.
so um
Yeah, I think you bring
Yeah.
up a very good point. I mean, it's something very similar in my profession in chiropractic, and I was taught by mentors many years ago, and they said people don't really care how much you know; they just want to know how much you care. And that was something that's always carried through with me. And like you said, um, truly being there, we know we've all been encountered through the healthcare world, medical world. My wife's a nurse. We understand what the level of service a lot of times, and that's what drives a lot of. I found drives a lot of practitioners away from the traditional medical model because it's like
Mm,
it's like there's a disconnect.
sure.
Oftentimes, like when you go, it's just
Like a
it's more.
it's like, well, I sometimes I just call it what it is, like, it's a different bedside manner.
It's a different bedside manner. And I think people really, especially in all professions, they want to know that you're there for them. And I think if they get that feeling that you have their best interest and you're going to
Mhm.
recommend no different than you would recommend for your mom or your wife, people understand that. They see that it's genuine.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, we can go on a personal opinion, maybe I'll be on a little rant here, but, like,
Go
I
ahead.
would think that, one thing that I like about the practice that I think you get out of it is, just honesty and transparency. Sometimes transparency is not easy. You
No,
know what I mean? Like
we need to hear it
it's,
sometimes.
I mean, sometimes you need to hear it. Like, I mean, I assume that I'm sure there are people that might take it the wrong way or be maybe a little miffed, but I think that that's important because mental health care is unique in that there has to be some sort of relationship,
Right.
when you're kind of doing that, and both sides have responsibilities, right?
Exactly. Well, you're creating a relationship,
Hmm.
and everything. Like I said, I always go back to like everything in life is a relationship of some form or
Sure.
fashion. So whether it's doctor-patient relationship, client relationship, it
Hmm.
comes back to relationships, and that's to me is really what makes. I don't know. I don't want to say better, but just makes more
Oh yeah.
uniqueness, and is that you really have their best interest in mind, and people know that.
And how else are you gonna be individualized with someone without
Right.
sitting and talking to them long enough to know what's going on?
So
You
true.
know?
So true. So Sky, my version in health is obviously health is a big word. It encompasses lots of things.
Mm,
I know one thing I've always taught and trained in my patients is that you can exercise right, you can eat right, but if you don't have your stress, which to me stress ties back into mental health,
mm,
the mental side of it can basically ruin or take out the importance of the other two. So
mhm.
I've always said that if there's bigger issues at play, it will override the other components of health. So I guess how do you tie that all together with the mental health working it into the matrix of health? Or how do you see it, I guess?
So yeah, so I would say that mental health is almost kind of like your outward. I mean, obviously it's internal, but you can generally like pick up when when people generally are happy, or when they are sad, when you don't need to, you're not going to hang out with them, because they're kind of they've been in a bad mood for a few
They
days,
suck the energy
yeah,
out of
they're
the
kind of,
room when they walk
yeah,
into it.
exactly. You're like,
Exactly.
okay. So I mean, we all have a general ability to kind of read a room a little bit,
Sure.
and kind of be like, oh yeah, don't want to talk to that person today. That give them some space. And so, in the same sense, essentially, the reason that is too is because and I'm not saying there's not occasions where people can be, what we call masking or acting like they're okay, but
Of course.
in general, at a deeper level, even if people are masking, sometimes you can generally be like, something's up. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so if you feel like I essentially, if you look at that as like an outward representation of basically everything,
Yeah.
right? Because mental health is, you know, I think we all know a difference between when we've had super depressed periods in our life, or like there's been grief, or
Of course.
you're just like you're not sleeping well for a little while, just something's going on, you're stressed about something at work,
Yep.
we
I see the mental health is kind of wraps in around too, is like goes back into basically what's your outlook on life, what's your attitude.
mhm,
And I know I go back to a lot of the mental health is just like what you think about, you bring about, and a lot of the Tony Robbins stuff is a lot of that is just that is he's getting people's mental health back in line.
sure,
What you focus on is what you're going to bring into your life. So if everything you
mhm,
focus on is negative, guess what you're going to find.
And that's what I mean about like its relationship. Is that it gives you like an overall picture of the culmination of everything else that you're doing in your life,
You got it.
whether it's physical, whether it's spiritual. I mean, there's so many different avenues that people can take. Creativeness.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody has these different ways of kind of like expressing themselves or getting in tune with their like who they are as a person and what they believe and how they want that to kind of set the trajectory of their life.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I think that's a challenge with the human being in its yourself is that with our higher functioning brain, your brain can be your best friend or your worst enemy.
oh,
And
absolutely.
there's no difference. We all have this brain.
Hmm.
It's just how are we using it, or how has it been transformed or changed as we've grown up by our life experiences? Because that's what I see as causes a lot of pictures that we see about ourselves and about others. Of course, is I was always taught mother, father, teacher, preacher.
Uh-huh.
Those are the ones who mold our lives and our outlook on life a lot of times.
Well, and another thing that I think about like in terms of not just whole body, but even like whole environment. Like if you can kind of consider, you know, your family, your marriage, like, and then within that, all these other smaller, intricacies.
Yep.
One of them, being like, for example, finances, right?
Yeah.
So, so one of the things, whenever you're trying to figure out finances, you're trying to figure out, okay, well, how can we save money? How can we do this, right?
Right.
So when you look at that, what do you have to do? You have to organize all the data. You're trying to figure out, oh, well, we do this, and then you're calculating everything, and then
It's a process.
it's a
It's a
process, and
process.
then you break everything down, and you try to figure out, okay, like how are we going to go about doing this? Um, but when you do that, like I heard someone say this once, or I feel like it's a saying. I can't remember exactly where, but they're like, um, if you ever want to know what your idols are, look at your checkbook,
Yeah. What's your
right?
focus? What's your
What's
focus
your
on? I can
what's
tell
your
you.
what's your focus on? And then I guarantee you can look at the focus and you can get a rough idea of whether or not that's healthy for you or not.
Exactly. So true because that's your driver, and whatever your drivers are, what you put energy towards, that's what's going to usually grow.
And then that's
Whether
your
that's
result,
whether
right?
it's positive or negative, and that's the challenge: is are you driving that energy in a positive manner that's going to promote more mental health? Or there's so many
Correct.
things out there nowadays with distractions that we haven't even talked about all that
Oh yeah.
compared to 40, 50 years ago, the other
Hmm.
generations. So that just all starts drawing us in all different ways, whether it's positive or negative.
Oh, for sure.
And I think that's where the bringing the reality to it, or the awareness
Hmm.
of what's going on and where your attention is driving. I see that as a huge component of mental health, is we have to give it some thought and
Sure.
process to what we're doing. Otherwise, the world will just take you wherever it wants to go, and you'll just kind of follow in the wind.
Yeah, and I think that one of the biggest things that we probably deal with is generally, I think, just stigma. I mean, yes, mental health awareness is a bigger thing now than it ever has been, I think. Right.
I think so too.
And more recently with, with COVID necessarily, like that was like the huge rise of telehealth now, and
Yeah,
then they kind of suspended the regulations for a while, and then
yeah,
for example, I had to go to we did like this virtual DEA kind of educational point through the DEA. They did it. You could just do it on like a Zoom meeting. But the whole idea behind of it was like looking at prescribing patterns, essentially trying to get a step ahead of any potential opiate epidemic 2.0s.
right. Abuse. Well, it's always the downside of medication is the abuse side of it, obviously.
Sure.
But yeah, that's nice to see that they're being more proactive
Hmm.
versus reactive, and you see that a lot. Um, One thing I wanted to back up to, you said stigma. Give us a little bit more clarity. When you said stigma, are you talking about how you see yourself as far as how others see you when you say what's the stigma?
I think both. I think it just depends on the person. I mean, I think you can have it both ways. You could have it one way or the other. Essentially, um, just because there is more awareness now.
Social media, is that what you're talking to or referring to?
Yeah. Oh, social media. Well, and there have been good things come out of it. Um,
100%.
for you know, but at the same time, no one really wants to admit their faults, especially in our society where social media, you only ever show the best versions of yourself,
Exactly.
right? So, I mean, the funny thing is I actually, most of the time when it's really personal and I want to have friends on Facebook, I just tell them to friend my wife because she's just basically the family channel. I haven't been on it in years, maybe outside of just to check a post or something if I got,
Yeah.
I wanted to look at it. But one of the things that I found is I'm glad that I never really got into that
Yeah.
because it's not that I don't want to keep up with people, it's that you have to realize that you can't compare yourself to everyone else.
100%.
You need to be comparing yourself to yourself.
Yeah, you should be your own competition.
Sure.
You can't do comparisons with others. You have to compete with yourself.
Yeah. And
And
if you want to feel better, you go, let's go feel better.
let's go feel better. Let's do something more productive versus let's go surf social media or
Sure.
watch a TikTok video or
Yeah.
things like that nature. But
Hmm.
I do think social media has been a big well, I think everything has a plus and a minus to
Oh,
it. And
absolutely.
like I said, it just depends on how you can focus that and have that reality, that understanding that everything is a plus and a minus, but you got to see both the plus and the minus to
Hmm.
keep it balanced. And I think that's a big challenge we have in our society is that everything gets out of balance, and it's hard to keep things balanced.
No, and it really is. And I mean, it's difficult to it's difficult because we know what the answers are. Everybody knows what the answers are. They're
Right.
like, "Oh, I shouldn't be vaping, shouldn't be dipping."
Shouldn't be eating
It's
that
like
donut.
I shouldn't be drinking that fourth or fifth cup of coffee today. Maybe I should not be doom scrolling at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night,
Right.
right there for a couple of hours, so it disrupts all my sleep pattern, signaling, and all that good
Wow.
things. It's like, no, I probably shouldn't have went to fast food 12 or 13 times this week because I
Yeah.
was in a hurry going from place to
Right.
place,
Yeah.
right? We know what they are,
It's the control, right?
but
How do we influence and say no?
yeah,
Sometimes it's
like
just
look,
how do we shift it gets a habit. How do we shift that habit pattern?
yeah, well, I mean,
And
I think part of that is to realize that it's not like one of those movie montages where, you know, within about 15 to 20 seconds, like there's almost complete resolution of whatever that like immediate problem was.
right, exactly.
You don't need to bite it all. When you eat a pizza, everyone's sharing the slices, right?
Yep. Piece
You're
of
not
pie.
trying to shove the whole thing in your mouth, and that's what you have to do with your problems. And
So true.
and just in your life in general, not that you even have, I mean, hopefully you don't have problems. I mean, or as little as possible, just your normal everyday sort of I have to get by
Yeah.
problems. Those are problems that everybody's got to deal with, but in general, that is not the case. There's
Right.
probably something going on that, you're pushing down or you're pushing away or you're not focused on. Like, I mean, we kind of talked about it when we said, you know what you know what you're focused on.
Right. And sometimes it's just nice to have someone come in and say, listen, an outside
Hmm.
unbiased person come in and say, hey,
Yeah,
and sometimes it is an awakening for them to say, hey, this is how about looking at it this way? And I
sure.
think that's what's so important about anyone in the healthcare professions is that you are trying to get them to take more responsibility for themselves,
Hmm.
look at what their options are, what's plus, what's minus, and make good decisions. Ultimately, they have to do it.
Hmm.
We can't do it for them.
No, no, we
Right.
can't. And when I'll say like in talk in terms of also talking about what we also do at the practice as well. That I mean, I think people do it now, but bringing it up consistently is probably not something that you see all the time. But we also um, kind of work with some gene testing companies as well. So exactly, we're going to look at your profile and see kind of what psychotropics work in what ways, and if there's any reasons why we would use particular agents based off, do you have variants in some of your genetics where
I
maybe you don't
love that.
metabolize this quickly, or
I
maybe
love that.
maybe you metabolize this not very well, or this entire class you have European ancestry, and so now you can't tolerate all of these SSRIs or something like that, where it's individualized and it's tailored to the person. And I think that's where it becomes a balance between the provider and the patient is I think at our practice, we're gonna like we all want to help you, so we're gonna dig as much as you as you want to dig or as little as you want to dig, but we can only go so far based off the information we have. And if you're willing to go and have more information, we do those things. We do neuropsychiatric testing for if we're looking for ADHD, and then we do the genetic testing to give us like complete profiles.
I think the genetic testing is
Mm-hmm.
fascinating to me, that you can actually start tailoring medications to a genetics. And I think that's such a new thing. You're seeing more and more of that. I see a lot of that happening in the cancer world. They're either looking at hormonal relationships, or like I said, there's some genetic testing that goes on as well. And I find that fascinating.
Well, I think, now this is me speculating here. But I think it's probably headed that direction for sure. So I think like the other day, if you're into investing or the investing world or whatever, I think there's like a whole group of people that sort of follow all the people in legislature, like Nancy Pelosi, and like the
Where they
trades and
put their money.
and like where they're going to put their money, right?
Of course.
Um, and so, I mean, they've just straight up like built entire platforms almost off kind of doing that sort of thing. But
Right.
anyway, she moved a bunch of money around. Well, one of the companies that um, I didn't make the connection right away, but one of the companies she moved a bunch of money around to is called um, Tempest, which is an AI company. But Tempest is also the parent company of one of the genetic tests we do,
Wow.
and that's probably why they're so cutting edge. And so some of the stuff that I've kind of seen from, just utilizing their services and their
Yeah.
their hubs and platforms and stuff, like you can see the potential. You see it right there. Like
Very
the parent
interesting.
company is artificial intelligence, right? So what's the next step? It's integrating sort of algorithmic artificial intelligence into the actual live genetic results, and then being able to process what would be good medication selections and dosings, and
Yeah, it
and try.
almost gets to the scary point where like they start getting AI, because I hear them talk about the same thing, identifying certain cells. And I guess I've always had fear, or some fear of, you start messing with genetic code. Like there's all these crazy
Hmm.
movies out there that
Oh
it
yeah.
gets your
Oh, I
brain
love
going.
that stuff. Hmm.
Exactly. How would you take away the I don't know if I wouldn't call it stigma, but how do you take away, or take the fear, the concern about consulting with mental health practitioners like yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I can understand like the reticence and like the kind of the hesitancy sometimes, especially if you've had a bad experience in the past.
Sure.
You're kind of wondering like, well, I've already done this 2 or 3 different times. I haven't had any help. Well,
Understandable.
I mean, I would say if you're just in terms of just looking to, you know, try to figure it out and you're willing to give another opportunity, um, I do think that our practice are the kind of, you know, practitioners that do take the time and go the extra step in order to like really explore what's going on with you outside of just you're someone else and
Yeah.
it doesn't
Ti
matter like
Time's up, get
and
off the
yeah,
couch.
exactly, even with the systems that we have in place with Spruce and all that, and
Yeah.
the direct communication messaging, where if you have a concern, you have a side effect. I mean, a lot of times we do stuff in between appointments simply because you told us a message, and we just give you further instructions, so it's just further individualized. And so I would say the thing is, if you don't, I think it's just obvious that, at least to me, that almost everyone needs mental health care.
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
won't disagree with you.
even outside of like elite psychiatry as a practice, I would recommend almost to everyone a general therapist.
Yeah.
That, someone that's non-biased, who can listen to you
Almost.
discuss a lot of the things going on in your life at a
Yeah.
more personal level, just simply to get it out in the open to someone and get their opinion on it. And and that's one of the things that I think that we do that is a strong point, is that, you know, back to the transparency. It's like it's a relationship, and if we're both transparent from both sides of it, then it's a collaborative thing, and we can work into getting you feel better, because that's what happens when you work as a collaborator instead of just
Yeah.
I'm in this chair and you're going to do what I tell you. We're not about that. I don't want to tell you what to do. I want to ask you what you would like to do based off the information I can give you about what I think would be good.
And how do we get you to
And then
that
how do we get
objective?
you,
Yeah.
how do we get you to
That's
a place
awesome.
to where, you feel functional? Because I think essentially, if you can answer the question 6 out of 7 days, I can wake up and function at 100%. efficiency and have zero issues, no anxiety, not getting irritable, not fighting with other people, not having a short temper. If you can get through an entire week like that, and maybe you only had one or two little hiccups, I'd say you're in pretty good mental health.
I think you're superhuman.
But
If you can do that in a week's
and
time.
you know, I saw that once that there's an interesting comparison when you say like when you actually look theoretically at the word health versus wellness, and health is variable. And so to even say like, oh, as long as I have like, I'm doing okay with health, I'm like, well, first you need to define what is okay. You have to have a standard,
Correct.
like a baseline to compare that to. So really, when you look at everyone's mental health as a collective, it's not that great.
Oh, I 100% agree with you that
So you don't
everybody
want
should
to
have
be
a
average. You want to be above average. You want to be functional. You
right.
want to be excelling at your life. Your stagnation and your complacency and waiting for the next day and hoping things are going to get better. If you're hoping anything, it's not to not put your hope in the right places, but I'm saying the old saying like insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and hoping for a different result.
Amen.
That's mental health.
I think you wrapped it up very, very well, and that's very well said. And I appreciate you taking the time to come in and share some
Not a
wellness
problem.
with
I
us.
enjoyed it.
And
Thank you.
like I said, if we come up with other topics or you come up with something, please reach out to me and we can have discussion. If there's
Yeah.
some new thing or you guys are bringing something else into your practice that
Mhm.
can help our community, let's get together and talk about that.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
and
the
and I
purpose.
guess as a final thing to say that as well, just because it is newer, we also do offer esketamine or Spravato treatment at our clinic now,
I don't know what that means.
which is intranasal ketamine
Oh, really?
for treatment-resistant depression. The other day, it just got a new indication where now it can be done monotherapy,
Wow.
even without running a concurrent antidepressant. It got FDA indicated for that. So if you've ever had past trials of that, then you
There's
can
always
come get it.
something new that
Yeah,
can
we
try
can do
something else.
that's cutting edge stuff.
Very nice.
Like NMDA receptor antagonism and working on glutamate and neuroplasticity and trying to kind of better those connections and actually like like at a, an organic level, actually try to help you improve some of those mental health,
Love it. I love
so we
it.
do offer that.
Well, thank you very much for coming in today, Skye. I truly appreciate this,
Oh,
and hopefully we can get together again down the road sometime and have more discussions.
yeah. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. Absolutely. You've been listening to Beyond the Adjustment, where we have conversations with other health minded professionals to create a healthier community.